Right now, we are at a situation where American crocodiles were endangered as recently as 15 or 16 years ago in 2007. They are now, guys, endangered.
No one expected the apex predators to start disappearing. For years, the rulers of Florida's wetlands had dominated without challenge, until suddenly they didn't. Bodies began washing up along the coastal estuaries, massive crocodiles torn apart by something powerful enough to kill them without leaving a trace of the fight. Scientists couldn't explain it. Nothing in the Everglades had the strength or the audacity to hunt a full-grown American crocodile. But they were wrong. Hidden in the murky waters, something from the other side of the world had been breeding, growing, and preparing to claim the throne. This is the story of how Florida's gentle giants were replaced by one of nature's most efficient killers. The Everglades is not a place for the weak. Spanning over 1.5 million acres of sawgrass marsh, mangrove forests, and slow-moving waterways, this subtropical for thousands of years, two ancient predators stood unchallenged at the summit of this violent. The American alligator dominates the freshwater zones. These living tanks can exceed 13 feet in length and weigh over 800 pounds. Their jaws generate crushing force capable of shattering turtle shells and snapping bones like twigs. Alligators are everywhere in Florida, so common that homeowners find them in swimming pools and golf course water hazards. They've adapted to human presence with remarkable ease, becoming an iconic symbol of the state itself. But there's another crocodilian in Florida that most people don't even realize exists. The American crocodile inhabits the brackish coastal waters where fresh and salt water merge. Unlike their alligator cousins, these reptiles are remarkably timid. They flee at the first sign of human presence, preferring remote mangrove coastlines far from civilization. Their temperament is so docile that in the entire recorded history of the United States, not a single person has ever been killed by an American crocodile in the wild. They are shadows in the ecosystem, powerful but invisible, dangerous but harmless by choice. These two species carved the Everglades into separate kingdoms through millions of years of evolution. Alligators claimed the inland freshwater territories while crocodiles controlled the coastal zones. The arrangement worked flawlessly because neither species challenged the other's domain. It was perfect balance, an ecosystem functioning exactly as nature designed. Then something shattered that ancient peace, and nobody saw it coming. The warning signs started subtly in late 2009. Park rangers conducting routine population surveys noticed anomalies in their data. Prime crocodile territories along the coast were suddenly vacant. The dominant males that researchers had tracked for over a decade, animals that defended their nesting sites aggressively, had vanished completely. These weren't young, inexperienced crocodiles that might relocate. These were mature adults deeply invested in their territories. Crocodiles don't abandon their domains casually. They're fiercely territorial, often fighting rivals to the death over the best basking spots and hunting grounds. When a dominant male disappears, younger males immediately move in to claim the vacant territory. But that wasn't happening. The territories remained empty, avoided by every crocodile in the area as if something had poisoned the water itself. Biologists conducting aerial surveys documented the scope of the problem. Entire stretches of coastline that should have been crowded with crocodiles showed no activity whatsoever. Nesting sites that had been active for generations sat abandoned. Even more disturbing, the juvenile survival rates had plummeted catastrophically. Areas where young crocodiles typically gathered in large groups were completely barren. When apex predators abandon their breeding grounds and their young simultaneously, ecologists recognize it as a mass displacement event. Something had entered the ecosystem with enough power to terrify animals that had never known fear, forcing them to make an impossible choice between fighting for their territory or fleeing to survive. Most chose survival. Then the bodies started appearing, and the mystery became a crisis. The first carcass was discovered by a fishing guide in a remote mangrove channel. It was an adult American crocodile, approximately 11 feet long, with massive trauma to its body. What shocked the guide wasn't just that the crocodile was dead, but how it died. The injuries were catastrophic. indicating an encounter with something incredibly powerful. Yet the surrounding area showed no signs of struggle. No torn vegetation, no churned mud, no evidence of the prolonged battle that should accompany a fight between two apex predators. More carcasses followed. Some were adults, others were large juveniles, all displaying similar patterns of fatal trauma without corresponding environmental evidence of combat. Whatever was killing these animals struck with overwhelming force and surgical precision. The attacks were so efficient that the victims barely had time to fight back. Biologists examining the remains noticed something else troubling. Many of the injuries were inflicted from angles, suggesting ambush tactics. These crocodiles weren't confronting a rival in open combat. They were being hunted by something that understood predation at an expert level, something patient enough to wait for the perfect moment to strike. The behavioral changes in the surviving crocodile population became increasingly erratic. Fishermen reported encounters with American crocodiles displaying unprecedented aggression. These normally reclusive reptiles were approaching boats, snapping at anglers, and exhibiting territorial behavior in areas they typically avoided. To experienced wildlife biologists, this indicated severe ecological stress. When prey animals act aggressively, it usually means they're defending resources that have become scarce. But these weren't prey animals. These were apex predators acting desperate. The obvious culprit seemed to be Florida's most infamous invasive species, the Burmese python. These massive constrictors had already devastated the Everglades mammal populations, reducing some species by over 90%. Pythons measuring over 18 feet had been documented in the park, and everyone knew they were capable of taking on large prey. In 2005, a widely publicized incident showed a python that had literally exploded trying to swallow a 6-foot alligator, the snake's body rupturing from the attempt. The logic was compelling. Python populations had expanded exponentially throughout the Everglades, pushing deeper into coastal mangrove forests that overlapped perfectly with American crocodile habitat. It seemed reasonable that these snakes had evolved to target larger reptilian prey, graduating from deer and raccoons to the apex predators themselves. But when forensic veterinarians examined the crocodile carcasses thoroughly, the python theory collapsed. Constrictors kill by wrapping around their prey and applying sustained pressure until the victim suffocates or experiences cardiac arrest. This method leaves distinct pathological signatures including broken ribs, crushed organs, and massive internal hemorrhaging in predictable patterns. None of the dead crocodiles displayed these markers. Whatever killed them used a completely different method, one involving tremendous bite force and explosive violence rather than gradual suffocation. With the python hypothesis eliminated, the mystery deepened into genuine alarm. If the most dangerous invasive predator in Florida wasn't responsible, what was? What could possibly be powerful enough to systematically eliminate apex predators from their own territory? The answer emerged not from the swamp, but from a suburban canal in Miami, wearing camouflage so effective that it had fooled everyone for years. University of Florida researchers received an unusual call from wildlife control officers in metropolitan Miami. They'd captured a crocodile in a residential canal system, miles from any wilderness area, and something about the animal seemed off. When the research team arrived to examine the specimen, they immediately understood the concern. The crocodile was young, probably less than 5 years old based on size, but its physical characteristics didn't match the profile of an American crocodile. The snout was subtly different, slightly broader and more robust. The coloration was darker, trending toward olive black rather than the typical grayish-green. These differences were minor enough that a casual observer wouldn't notice, but to trained herpetologists, they were glaring inconsistencies. More concerning than the physical differences was the animal's temperament. Young American crocodiles are naturally cautious, often skittish around humans. This specimen displayed shocking aggression, lunging at handlers with a ferocity that veteran researchers had never encountered in native crocodiles of any age. It showed no fear whatsoever, only predatory interest and territorial raid. The team hypothesized several possibilities. Perhaps this was a genetic mutation producing unusual physical traits and behavioral aberrations, or possibly a hybrid, the result of crossbreeding between an American crocodile and an alligator, though such hybridization had never been documented. Without genetic analysis, they couldn't be certain. Tissue samples were sent to the university's genomics laboratory, beginning a months-long wait for definitive answers. During that anxious period, more reports flooded in. Additional mysterious crocodiles were being spotted across South Florida, all displaying similar anomalies. Researchers documenting these animals noticed they were growing at accelerated rates, developing approximately 28% faster than Native American crocodiles of comparable age. When the DNA results finally returned, they confirmed everyone's worst nightmare and made it exponentially more terrifying. The genetic profile wasn't a match for Crocodilus acutus, the American crocodile. It wasn't a hybrid or a mutant. The DNA was a perfect match for Crocodilus niloticus, a species that should have been 6,000 miles away on an entirely different continent. The animal in the Miami Canal was a Nile crocodile, and its presence in Florida represented an ecological catastrophe in progress. The implications were staggering. American crocodiles, despite their impressive size and strength, are fundamentally gentle animals with zero recorded human fatalities in United States history. Nile crocodiles are the complete opposite. They're responsible for between 200 and 500 human deaths annually across Africa, making them one of the most dangerous predators on Earth. These animals don't just defend territory or react to threats. They actively hunt humans as prey. Nile crocodiles are larger, growing up to 18 feet and weighing over 2,000 pounds. They're faster, more aggressive, and significantly more adaptable to varying environmental conditions. Their bite force exceeds that of American crocodiles by a substantial margin, and their hunting strategies are brutally efficient. In their native Africa, they regularly prey on wildebeest, zebras, and occasionally even hippopotamuses, animals weighing thousands of pounds. The Native American crocodiles weren't dying from disease or environmental stress. They were being systematically eliminated by a superior competitor, an apex predator from another continent that was stronger, faster, more aggressive, and infinitely more dangerous to humans. The critical question demanded immediate answers. How did an African super predator establish a breeding population in the heart of the Florida Everglades? Nile crocodiles cannot swim across oceans. They didn't arrive on cargo ships or drift across the Atlantic on debris. There's only one plausible explanation, and it points directly to human criminal negligence. Florida's exotic pet trade is a massive underground industry generating hundreds of millions of dollars annually through the illegal trafficking of dangerous animals. Nile crocodiles are explicitly prohibited for private ownership without extraordinarily rare permits requiring maximum security facilities. Yet demand remains high among collectors who view deadly predators as status symbols. The pattern is depressingly predictable. Someone acquires hatchling Nile crocodiles through black market channels. At 6 inches long, they seem manageable, almost cute. But these animals grow rapidly, reaching 6 feet within 3 years and becoming increasingly aggressive as they mature. When the novelty pet transforms into an uncontrollable 1,000-pound man-eater that requires massive amounts of food and secure housing, the owner panics. Rather than facing legal consequences for illegal possession, they choose the easiest solution. They dump it into the nearest body of water and pretend it never existed. Analysis of the captured Nile crocodiles revealed they were closely related, likely siblings from a single clutch. This wasn't a series of random releases occurring over years. All the specimens traced back to one catastrophic event. Probably a small group of hatchlings either escaping from an inadequate enclosure or deliberately released by an overwhelmed owner. That single act of criminal irresponsibility unleashed an ecological nightmare. What makes this particularly horrifying is the timeline. Based on the size and maturity of captured specimens, Researchers estimate the founding population has been living wild in Florida for at least 8 to 10 years, possibly longer. They'd been breeding successfully, establishing territories, and systematically displacing native species for nearly a decade before anyone realized what they were. The Nile crocodiles had been hiding in plain sight, their similarity to American crocodiles providing perfect camouflage. To untrained observers, they looked close enough to native species that nobody questioned their presence. By the time scientists confirmed their identity, the invasion was already deeply established. The discovery triggered emergency response protocols. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission partnered with university researchers to launch an intensive eradication program. 3 Nile crocodiles were captured initially, but biologists understood this represented a fraction of the actual population. The Everglades spans over 1,500 square miles of difficult terrain, most of it completely inaccessible. Locating every invasive crocodile would be nearly impossible. The ecological stakes are catastrophic. If Nile crocodiles establish a self-sustaining breeding population, they'll outcompete Native American crocodiles for every resource. They grow faster, hunt more aggressively, and tolerate colder temperatures, meaning they could potentially expand their range far beyond South Florida into Georgia, the Carolinas, and beyond. The entire Southeast could become Nile crocodile habitat within a generation. But the human safety implications are even more terrifying. Florida's entire approach to wildlife management assumes that the reptiles inhabiting its waterways are native species with predictable, generally non-threatening behaviors. Nile crocodiles obliterate that assumption. They view humans not as threats to avoid, but as potential prey items. Every kayaker, every fisherman, every child playing near the water becomes a target. If Nile crocodiles become permanently established, Florida must completely redesign its public safety infrastructure. Warning signs would need to escalate from cautionary to explicitly dangerous. Public access to waterways might require restriction. The Everglades National Park, which attracts over 1 million visitors annually, could transform from a treasured wilderness into a designated danger zone where human fatalities become statistically inevitable. The economic consequences would devastate Florida's tourism industry. Ecotourism generates billions of dollars annually, supporting thousands of jobs across the state. If headlines begin reporting human deaths caused by African man-eating crocodiles in Florida waters, tourism collapses overnight. Simultaneously, the state would need to allocate millions of dollars to monitoring programs, rapid response teams, and permanent eradication efforts. And here's the brutal reality that nobody wants to acknowledge. There's no humane solution. Wildlife officials cannot capture these animals and relocate them to Africa. No facility wants them. No zoo can house potentially dozens of 18-foot apex predators. The only viable option to protect human life is systematic eradication, hunting and killing every Nile crocodile that can be found. It's a harsh solution, killing animals that are simply doing what evolution programmed them to do. They're not evil or malicious. They're just crocodiles being crocodiles, but they cannot be allowed to remain. Looking at the complete scope of this crisis reveals an uncomfortable truth. The Nile crocodile isn't the real monster in this story. It's just an animal acting on instinct. The true invasive species, the actual threat to Florida's ecosystem, is human arrogance and greed. Every ecological disaster in Florida's history traces back to human decisions. The Burmese pythons decimating mammal populations were released by pet owners. The lionfish destroying reef ecosystems arrived through the aquarium trade. The green iguanas overwhelming parks escaped from private collections. And now, one of Africa's deadliest predators is loose in the swamps because someone prioritized their ego over public safety and ecological responsibility. Florida has become a dumping ground for the exotic pet industry's mistakes, and the Everglades pays the price for every transaction. But the responsibility extends beyond just the pet trade. We've spent decades systematically destroying the natural habitats that native species depend on, replacing coastal mangroves with luxury developments, redirecting the Everglades water flow for agricultural profit, poisoning what remains with chemical runoff. We've put pushed the Native American crocodile into smaller, fragmented habitats, stressed them to the breaking point through habitat destruction, and then dropped a super predator directly into their weakened population. The tragic irony is overwhelming. We invested millions of dollars and decades of effort bringing the American crocodile back from near extinction, celebrating conservation success, while simultaneously creating perfect conditions for their replacement by something infinitely more dangerous. Right now, Florida faces a critical window. If wildlife officials can locate and eliminate every Nile crocodile before they establish an irreversible breeding population, this crisis can be contained. But if even a few breeding pairs evade capture, if they successfully reproduce and spread, the Everglades transforms permanently. The ecosystem we've known for thousands of years disappears, replaced by something fundamentally different and vastly more dangerous. The clock is ticking. Every day that passes represents another opportunity for these animals to breed, to expand territory, to entrench themselves so thoroughly that eradication becomes impossible. Florida officials are racing against biology itself, fighting to stop an invasion that never should have happened, struggling to protect an ecosystem we've already damaged beyond recognition. This is the consequence of treating nature as entertainment, of believing we can own anything without facing repercussions. We created this monster through carelessness and arrogance. Now, we're forced to destroy it, spending millions to fix a problem that cost someone maybe a few $1,000s to create. And somewhere out there in the dark waters of the Everglades, more Nile crocodiles are growing, breeding, and waiting for their chance to claim the throne permanently.